Hello, Java Challenger. Today I have here Tom Coos. Tom Coos is a Java champion. He is also a DevRel at Timefold. He is the Big Jug organizer. He's also a keynote speaker. He gave talks in many famous conferences around the world. And Tom also lives in between Antwerp and Brussels in Belgium. Tom, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
You're most welcome. I'm doing pretty well. Today's a more casual day, just being at home, working from home. We'll get down to that when we talk about the DevRel job, I think. So today was more relaxing. Got to take my kid to the daycare myself, so no rush. And now having a casual conversation with you. So I'm looking forward to chatting a bit about career today.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to it too.
Mm.
So, Tom, I would like to know, what has your career trajectory been like? Can you tell us what were your challenges? What were the things you applied that really worked your career? Like your career from basically your career trajectory from the beginning to nowadays.
Okay, from the beginning is for me already kind of a weird start because when I graduated high school, I was convinced, and a little bit arrogant, I was convinced that I could be a better teacher than my teachers. So I actually first got my high school teacher's degree. So I'm allowed to legally teach in Belgium at least law, economics, and IT. But IT in high schools means Word, Excel, PowerPoint. But in the end of that, there was like a good 2 weeks where we also got a bit of JavaScript. And that was really like, oh, I can type something and then something on the computer will happen. That's amazing. I want to learn more about that. So I graduated that degree. I was 21 and I was looking around and I think, I know nothing about the world. And now I have a degree. So technically I could go work until basically my retirement. But I feel like that's a personal thing. There's teachers that are really good in their job without seeing the real world. But I really felt like I need to explore something outside academia and outside teaching before I can confidently stand in front of a classroom and tell like 14-year-olds how the world works. If you graduate your teacher's degree and you immediately go teach, I felt like there was something missing there. So I decided to go for another bachelor degree. So I have two bachelors. I don't have a master's degree, but I have two bachelors. And the second bachelor's was applied information technology. So that's basically programming and analysis and such. Fell in love there, did quite some trips to other countries. So I went on an Erasmus exchange to Finland. So I lived in Finland for 4 months, which I can recommend to anyone. Go live in another country for a while. You learn so many new things and cultural differences, and it's really fun. After that, the last semester of that IT education was an internship at a company. So I know it's controversial in different countries, but in Belgium, your internship does not get paid. But in the end of the internship, they did offer me a job. And weirdly enough, well, weirdly, most people consider it weird, but I stayed at that company for 11 and a half years until I recently, like half a year ago, made the switch to Timefold. So in those 11 and a half years, it was at a company called InfoSupport. It was a consultancy company. So basically I was a consultant for 11 and a half years. And I really loved consultancy because every year or so you get assigned a new project and you suddenly enter a new company. You learn a bunch of different techniques. You also learn how to communicate properly with the business stakeholders. You sometimes get into arguments, and then afterwards you think, oh yeah, I didn't approach it very well. So there's a lot of room to experiment and to try things out and sometimes to fail, because I was a consultant in different countries and even Belgium and the Netherlands, even though I live in the north part of Belgium. So we speak Flemish. The Netherlands speaks Dutch, but it's basically the same language with a few different words. But it's those few different words that were actually sometimes the problem, because sometimes they mean the opposite of each other, or just the cultural difference of how direct you speak to someone. Those are all things you learn when you live and work in a different country. That we're all sort of different. So I did, over those 11 and a half years, I did like close to 10 projects in different countries, usually for big financial institutions, but it was very diverse. I think to get back, because this is the Java Challengers channel, but maybe I should go back to the story of why I'm doing Java, because it's a really silly story. So at my consultancy company that I was at, Info Support, they basically did two programming languages, .NET, so C# or Java. And people ask me, like, how did you start your Java journey? And it was a stupid ass asking my then CEO, what do you need? I basically asked my CEO, what do you need? Do you need a .NET developer or do you need a Java developer? Because I don't really care. Where can I be of the most value to you? And at that point, they said, oh, I need some more people in the Java department. And when I quit my job 6 months ago, I actually told the story like, and I was reflecting, like, what did that moment mean? And that moment basically meant a totally different career path, because we sometimes say, oh yeah, your programming language doesn't matter, but it matters a lot. I would not be a Java champion if we at that point had said, you go do .NET. I would not be having this conversation with you probably, because we maybe have never met. If I was like in the .NET sphere, I wouldn't be talking at Devox UK or Devox or these kind of conferences. My entire friend circle would be different. Even the colleagues with whom I've done projects would be different. So it's a silly thing to say my manager chose for me, but that's kind of how my career in Java started. I did fall in love pretty quickly because many people were complaining back then that Java was an old, boring enterprise language. And I'm so happy that I joined just as Java 8 came out. So that was Lambdas and Streams were the big ones. So that's already cool. And then once we get to Java 9 and JPMS was maybe a bit of a bumpy ride. But once we started going to 6 month release cadence cycles, you could really see that Java is really evolving much quicker. So basically did that for 11 and a half years being a consultant. And then my switch to Timefold actually came because I was speaking at these conferences, which I started doing somewhere in 2017, mainly taking what I learned from my teacher's degree, because I still love teaching, and doing that in like a different context. So I'm not teaching high school students, but I am teaching and educating, other developers. And actually the CTO of Timefold now, he saw me speak at a conference. And he basically said, hey, Tom, I'm going to start this company, or he had started a company at that time. I don't know anymore. And he said, I'm going to need someone like you to talk about Timefold at conferences. I want you to be a developer relations person. But that's not the first person we are going to hire, because we're a startup. So I'll get back to you in a year and a half. So year and a half later, I basically got a message that said, it's time. Do you want to come? And then I said no, despite being offered my dream job, because I've always wanted to do this. I said no, because I was a bit too afraid to make the jump and make this change. And then in a week or two, it felt really good first to say no, because I could say to my current boss, like, hey, I'm going to stay, don't worry. But I felt like it was such a missed chance that week after week, I got like slightly more depressed. What did I say no to? This was basically my dream job that got offered to me on a golden plate, and I said no. And then after a while, I basically just, in a way, cracked and said, no, I need to do this. I just need to do this. I'm going to call Timefold. Do they still have the job? Because, I said no, so they were probably looking for someone else. And after a heartfelt conversation, they finally said, yeah, we still want you. If you still want the job, the offer is still open. So I accepted the offer, and then had a heartbreaking conversation with my previous manager to tell him, like, thank you for the 11 and a half years with all the support, but I'm going to try this new adventure. So that's kind of the story up until now. There is like a small gap in between where I was out for half a year because of a burnout, and maybe we could talk about that as well a bit, because this is a career interview. So I think it's important to, looking back now, I think it's important to show to people that even though you've had a burnout, you can still become a Java champion, keynote speaker, and everything you mentioned in the beginning. I don't like bragging about myself, but I must say when you were saying all the things that I'm doing now, I was quite impressed by myself. Who is this person? And then I realized, oh, he's talking about me.
That's amazing. That's a really important topic to explore, but I'm going to start from the beginning, from everything you said. It's very interesting that you said that you did the Erasmus exchange. And since nowadays it's very common that Java developers who work in international projects, what were these cultural differences I would think, oh, that's so different than my culture. What were those culture differences? And how was the communication with them? What you saw on them that you thought, okay, this is something that we would never do in our countries or something like that.
So I can tell a bunch of different stories. I'll start with one from Erasmus. That was still my student era. So simple stuff like, do you start a meeting on time, or is it acceptable to start a meeting 2 minutes late? Typically, you see that Belgian, Dutch, and German people, when you say we're going to a bar at 7, do you, at least at student area, right? So if we say we're going to a bar at 7, you could see from which you could almost put a timer when which country would arrive. Like Germans and such, and Belgians well on time. Spanish like 5 to 10 minutes later, or even half an hour later. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just cultural. What do you mean when you say we meet somewhere at 7? Do you mean 7? Or do you mean 7? You know, this thing where how important is it to be somewhere was one thing. Also, how open people are to talk about personal feelings or more personal stuff. Do you stay on the surface, or do you speak about your family or your fears or whatever? And I noticed with the Finnish people are stereotypically known as like being a bit distant. I don't know if you've seen these memes online with Finnish people waiting at the bus stop, but there's 2 meters in between every person. Like personal space is like this big thing. The Finnish people, that they stereotypically have these memes that if you take a picture of Finnish people at the bus stop, there's like meters in between them. Sometimes the joke was made, COVID has no impact on Finnish culture because they keep distance anyway. But I must say that despite that being true, these are the kind of people that once you're friends with them, you're really like, I mean, Finnish people are known to do sauna fully naked with family. So that is the kind of closeness you suddenly get. You go from keeping distant to basically being naked in a sauna together. So that's like those differences are just so fun to explore. And especially when I was on Erasmus in Finland, there's people from Brazil, there were people from Mexico, there were people from India, South Korea. We were all different in our own way, but we had something in common. We went to the same school in Finland. And then you kind of learn a lot about different cultures, different music. I learned about K-pop because one of the people there was South Korean, and they were like, hey, did you listen to this? And that turned out to be Psy, who did the Gangnam Style song. So I knew about that before. You learn about so much cool stuff that way. But maybe back to something more on the professional side. If you started at my previous company, you had the option to go live in the Netherlands for a year. And I did that, and I lived and worked in Amsterdam. And there you learn that despite being relatively close together culturally, there is way less hierarchy in a company in the Netherlands than in Belgium. As in the Netherlands, you can be pretty direct, almost have sort of a semi-fight about architecture or code. And then 5 minutes later, you can have a coffee together and just relax and talk about kids and how your holidays are going. If you do that in Belgium, people are like a bit pissy. And if you talk to a manager or like an architect that's like hierarchically above you, they will not accept that in Belgium. I think what might help your audience here is there's one great book called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer, where she describes these cultural differences and actually has a map to show on, I think, 6 or 7 different topics. How do these cultures differ from each other? Is this an open culture or a more closed culture? Is this a hierarchical culture where you're not supposed to give feedback to your superiors? Or is this like a culture where everyone's kind of the same level? And that book really helped me a lot. And I think in the world that we live now, I'm talking to you, you're sitting in Dublin in a different country. You need to know a bit about how other cultures communicate, because else you have these stupid misunderstandings, and it might actually hamper your career if you don't properly communicate in the way that the opposing party is expecting to communicate. For example, when you communicate with Americans, and this is, of course, broad generalization, this will not count for everyone, but the American culture is, if you want to give feedback, you need to be pretty careful. You need to say, the joke is usually, it's like a bad news sandwich. You say something positive, then you say what you actually want to say from feedback, and then you say something positive again. And the thing is like sandwiched between positivity. If you do that with any other culture, if you do that in Belgium, people will think that feedback is not important because you've said two important things. But for Americans, as far as I've understood, they will really listen to that middle part and take that to heart. So being able to properly express yourself towards different cultures is super important, especially in this day and age where a lot of stuff is online as well.
Yeah, getting feedback is very difficult because you're dealing with the ego of the person, and you have to really think through about facts, never about the personality of the person. And maybe even in cultures that are very direct, it's still difficult to give or receive feedback because it's, in my experience, it's important to give feedback by voice. Because if you give the feedback by writing the words, most of the communication is lost. I would say that more than 50%, right? Because tone of voice.
It's tone of voice, it's the expression in which you say it, it's how loud you say something. It all, especially when it's tricky feedback, someone is not performing the way you expect them to, or you have to admit a failure yourself, maybe. Yeah, those are tricky conversations. You want to get those right. So I think working on your communication skills is one of the most important things you should do for your career.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Okay, so Tom, since we are talking about communication, tell me more about how to communicate to business, how to handle arguments, and how to translate those requirements into technical requirements. So was it a challenge for you working with different companies, probably different countries? How was this challenge of communicating with those business people and translating those requirements into technical tasks?
Yeah, you grow a lot when you do a job for a while. And especially if you introspect and sometimes do a retrospective for yourself, I think then you start to realize what mistakes you make during a week. So you know how we do, most companies do agile 2 weeks and then they have a retrospective at the end. I think the retrospectives are often too much about the project and not about the people themselves. So I actually took some time, maybe not every 2 weeks, but every month, to just sit there and write down like, where did things go wrong? What could I have done better? And I ask help for that. For example, when I was having a massive argument with an architect on one of my first projects, because I thought he was being suboptimal would be a nice word, but I just thought he was being an idiot. But he was an architect, so he's above me. And the way I was trying to convince him was just by stating how I thought it would be better. And of course, that led to a giant argument. And it took me a while to figure out why did that happen. And one of the things that I learned from another book is, I believe it was from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's the idea that you should first try to understand, then try to be understood. So first ask questions. Why is this person saying the things you might find dumb, idiotic, or suboptimal? Why did this person do that? And I think that's a mistake that often technologists make. We have a solution in our head and we just want to project our solution into the heads of everyone around us and convince everyone. And I think when you want to convince someone, you first need to understand where they come from, because maybe you are missing an important piece in the puzzle. Why a certain thing is happening the way it is happening. There was one project, and I'll say it a bit vaguely so it can't be traced back, but there was one project where at some point we made a technical decision that I thought was bad. It was too much cutting corners, and I felt the quality of the project was not good enough at that point. Like I felt that it was not quality enough. But then I was angry about it for a couple of days until I spoke to someone and started asking the why questions. Why are we actually doing it this way? Because I'm being upset because my giant, beautiful design isn't being selected and we're doing this suboptimal thing. And then it turns out that the suboptimal thing was chosen because we ran out of budget. It was more if we don't put this suboptimal thing into production, then we won't have the budget to build your big fancy thing. And then I was like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. So whenever you run into something that you don't understand, whether it's a business requirement that you don't fully understand, why do they want this? Or whether it's a colleague saying something that you think, why would you say that? Ask him the why questions like, why are you saying this? What do you mean? I'm trying to understand. And once you understand something really well, and once you understand a person really well, it's way easier to do all the things you asked me, like transform the business requirements, because you kept asking why, how does this work? How does this benefit your company? It helps you to communicate with your colleagues. It helps you with a bunch of stuff. And also, it stops you from projecting solutions too quickly. Because some people think that having a good career means you walk in somewhere and you say, you need to do it like this, you need to do it like that. And that's not how it works. Whenever I walk into a company as a well, used to, because I just changed jobs, but when I walked into a company as a consultant, the first week, I would just ask questions. So just to state, these were engagements for a year, so I had the time to ask questions for a week. If they only hire you for a week, asking only questions is maybe not the best value you can offer. But really deeply understand the problem. And then once you show to people that you deeply understand their problem, they're much more willing to listen to you or to even listen to your suggestions. So listening is, I think, the key to solve these issues. Even if you're having a conflict with someone, for example, if you have to tell someone that they're not performing, ask them, like, is something going on? How can we help you? What was this exercise we did? Because we did train these skills, this is not something that suddenly happens. My previous company actually hired an actor to try out these scenarios. And one of the scenarios he played was basically an employee that was not performing, and I was the manager, and I had to tell him in a good way that he was not performing. But that actually wasn't the clue of that exercise. The clue was that person in the scenario had just lost his daughter. And if you approach that scenario in I'm going to tell you why you're not performing, and you hear afterwards that something happened in his family, you will feel awful. But if you start with, I can see that things aren't going so well recently. Is something going on? Is there anything we can do to help? And then they start speaking about their daughter. Not only does that put more into context, like what the situation actually is, you also feel more empathically towards them. Oh yeah, of course you're feeling bad. And it's normal that in those periods you might perform less. So take your time and let's see how we can build it up again. And if you have that sort of conversation, well, you have the two opposites, right? If I do the manager approach that just says, you're not performing, you need to do better, the chance that they quit is extremely high. At least I would quit if a manager approached me in that way. On the other side, those are the sort of employees that you can keep for life and that will be very loyal if that's how you communicate with them. And that's not for employees, that's for managers as well, that's for colleagues, that's basically for anyone. So just trying to understand people is like the main key, I think.
Yeah, it is really important. And just one thing I would like to add is that we have to try to avoid saying why, because when we say why, it's kind of being confrontational. Because when we were kids, like when our parents say, hey, why are you doing that? Kind of confronting us. And if we say why, like why you're doing that, it seems that we are being confrontational. We're saying, hey, you're wrong. So sometimes it doesn't mean that you can't use why all the time. But, we can also vary from why to, you could ask also, what's the reason?
Yeah.
To not to look confrontational, because sometimes in a normal conversation you ask why, then the person think we are being confrontational. And obviously it depends on the tone of voice as well. Like the tone of voice you use when you say, hey, why are you doing that? Like it looks like you are confronting the person, but sometimes it's not. It's just the word they're using.
Yeah, exactly. And it also depends on culture. Some cultures are way more accepting of having the direct why question instead of having the what's going on? I'm used to you being way more productive. Is something going on? That's way more
Soft.
soft. So it depends a bit on the person as well. So getting to know people in their good times when you're getting along is also very valuable for when something happens in your team. Like you, if you only start socially interacting with your team if someone is having like a crisis, then it's sort of already too late because you don't really know how to interact with this person.
Exactly.
No. But
What about
good
teaching?
addition.
Yeah.
You should watch out with the why, with the direct why.
Yeah. And about teaching, do you have any tips to be a better speaker and to convey your message more clearer?
Yeah, I have a couple. Let me start maybe with how much you want to convey. Because I have seen some conference talks that are technically excellent. They're very in depth. The only problem is that on average, people forget about 95% of a talk. Just because it's, especially at a conference where you're doing talk after talk after talk, it's hard to remember a lot or to have that stored in your brain. So what I try to do with the talks that I do is I basically have three key words, as keywords or key statements, and I try to inspire people. I think especially at conferences when you're giving talks, inspiring people, giving them a feeling about something is way more important than the purely deeply technical stuff and trying to explain everything in detail. Now, if you do go to such a talk where they do explain you things in detail, from a visitor perspective, there's nothing wrong with skipping a talk to process the previous talk. I think the biggest mistake you can make at a conference is going to all the talks. Not only should you go to the hallway track, basically talk to people in the hallway, but I think sometimes skipping a talk and just processing what you've learned so far that day will be way more beneficial than seeing another talk and having information piled on top of you. What I can also pass along is from the presenter perspective is try to make it fun. Try to empathize with your audience. I try to tell more personal stories that people might relate with, yes or no. Like I gave a talk last week and I mentioned the fact that I have become a dad. And I can honestly see in the room, based on how faces change, who is a parent, because they know exactly what I'm going to say. And maybe it's not just that. I try to find cultural references. In the Netherlands, for example, I make a joke about how the Belgian roads are awful because that's what they usually joke about. So I try to find some things to keep the audience engaged. For me, a talk is not just content either or inspiration. It's entertainment in a way. You are trying to capture and keep the attention of your audience. And that counts for conference talks, but also counts for doing a presentation at your office. It counts for doing a management report. You don't want them to just listen to your bullet points. You want them to understand what you've done. You want to convey a message, and to convey that message, it is your job to kind of entertain the audience. And entertainment does not say that you need to juggle some balls and do a weird dance or whatever. It basically means emphasize with the audience or who you're speaking to. And when it comes to learning from the learner's perspective, one of the biggest mistakes, and that's what ultimately led to my burnout as well, that I think many people make is trying to learn too much. And it's being pushed a bit because some people say, oh, if you only know one programming language, you're falling behind. You need to know 7 programming languages. And you need to know about security because we're no longer DevOps, we're now DevSecOps. And then we need to do it 10 times because we're 10x developers. So there's this massive wave of information coming at us. And I see it especially now with AI, all these AI models coming at you. At some point, it's fully acceptable to put your boundaries. Like I've learned C# in the past, but after my burnout, I basically decided, you know what? I am overwhelmed with all the new stuff coming at me. I'm pretty confident that I can make a good living being a Java consultant. So I'm just going to focus on Java and the entire ecosystem. And whenever something's Java, I'm going to be able to excel in it. And I'll sometimes look at other programming languages, but I let most of that pass by. Now, there's a danger in that, is that you'll miss something very cool or important. But from a mental health perspective, it has helped me a lot to just focus. And whether that's focusing on a programming language or focusing on a problem domain, like I'm going to solve Timefold now solves optimization problems, like planning optimization. Now I'm fully into that. I'm doing like a little bit of Python, but I'm still focusing on a certain area, and that keeps me sane. Because if I also need to focus on everything out there, there's no time for that. Yeah, I think those are kind of the most important parts. When it comes to learning, though, I did prepare by bringing one book, and I hope it shows. This one. Oh,
nice.
I have the filter on it, but yeah,
Yes.
It's called the Programmer's Brain, and it basically explains how your brain works when you're learning code.
Oh,
And
that's very interesting.
Getting some insights into cognitive load and what it means when your brain gets overloaded and what it means when other people read your code. That's very interesting, because if they don't have enough context about your code, any code can look bad. But once they understand your code, it becomes easier to read as well. Also, one of the examples that I don't know was in this book or another book was about Java streams. When you see Java streams for the first time, it's alien. It's weird. It looks strange. If you're only used to for loops, the streams API really messed with my head for a while. And what is this arrow thing, the lambdas? What does this arrow thing do? But once you get used to that API, it becomes super readable. It becomes clean.
Yes.
It becomes perfectly clean code. But if you've never seen the syntax, then it's just alien. What is this language? I actually had a slightly older colleague who's been programming Java for almost 30 years. And Java becomes 30 at the end of the week when we're recording. So he's been from the beginning. And when I submitted a pull request to him with a simple stream with a filter and a map, he told me, like, why didn't you use a for loop? What is this alien syntax? This is super complex. And I told him, no, this is super easy. But easy is only a matter of perspective. If you know something, it's usually easy, even though it once used to be hard. Like a silly example, maybe, my mother can't type on a keyboard at all. She thinks it's super hard. But when I type, and probably when most developers type, you don't even think about it. You just think the words and your hands sort of magically move. It's not difficult anymore. But difficult is often a matter of perspective. There's intrinsic difficulty, like 1 + 1 is obviously easier than calculating the square root of 200,003, blah, blah, blah. That's intrinsically easier, but there's also this part of how much do you know about the problem already?
Yeah, those are very good points. And I totally agree with you that difficulty depends on the context. For example, for this developer who's been programming with Java for many years, more than 30 years probably. No, not more than 30.
That's not possible.
It's not possible. Like this developer who's been working with Java most of the 30 years. And for him, streams was something from another world.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't used to it. And like the same context for any other subject. If you're not used to that specific thing, you're gonna find it very difficult. Or if you don't know about the fundamentals of a certain technology, it's gonna be a lot harder as well. Very good. So what was your feeling when you said no to the Timefold opportunity to become a DevRel?
At first, it felt good to say no, because I could say yes to my current manager and basically keep the status quo and not change. And not changing is easier. It's just conceptually, we're creatures of habit. We like, despite liking some adventure, we don't like adventure all the time. To give the extreme example, you maybe like a roller coaster, but you don't want to be on a roller coaster 24/7. So there is quite a bit of us that wants to keep the status quo. You don't want to move a house every week. You don't want to change relationship every week. You want things to be relatively stable. And I had been at info support for 11 and a half years. They supported me through the burnout phase. They gave me a lot of career opportunities. I was just happy there. So I actually wasn't even looking for a job. I was approached to come work at Timefold. So when I initially said no, it felt good to say no because I could go back and keep the status quo. But then the more I thought about it, it was like, yeah, but this DevRel thing is something I've wanted to try for a while. I've spoken to quite a few people who do this role for years. It seemed interesting, exciting, a bit like jumping on a roller coaster at some points. And I just started feeling worse. I started feeling, despite nothing changing in my job at InfoSport, I just started feeling worse because I said no to this massive opportunity. Because just to give some context for people that don't know DevRel that well, basically you are the voice of the community towards the company and the sort of the voice of the company towards the community. Like you're this, not a spokesperson sounds too unidirectional because I do talk a lot with developers that use Timefold and then bring that back to the company where I look at the broader Java community. So that's something I really wanted to do. Now, if you want to do that for a company, you really need to stand behind what they're doing. So in our case, we have an open source Java-based optimization solver, which is quite the mouthful, but it is actually a open source project. And of course, we have some enterprise stuff as well, but it was a problem space I really believed in. I was already a big fan of Timefold before I joined. The pay is okay, because in the end, you work also a bit for money, so the pay was good. And it was at a company that trusts me completely. It's like they approached me, they really wanted me. So if all of that is true, and I said no, then I'm an idiot. After a week or two, I started thinking like, why did I say no? They offered me like that perfect thing. So it actually started to give me massive anxiety. Despite nothing changing with info support, and info support still fine. I would still go back there if it turns out that Timefold doesn't work out for me in the end. But just day after day, I was thinking like, oh man, why did I say no? Oh man, why did I say no? Maybe it started to feel a little bit, and the analogy is not fully correct, but imagine you play the same numbers on the lottery every week. And one week you decide not to buy the lottery ticket. And that week, your numbers that you always select, that week, those numbers win the big jackpot. That's sort of how I started feeling.
My God.
Like I said no to something that was an amazing opportunity. And jackpot is like pure money, but this was more. This was being able to do more for the Java community as well, because it would be my basically full-time job. The problems we're solving with Timefold are very cool, as in saving a bunch of travel time, which is good for the environment because less CO2. When you calculate something with Timefold, you can make sure that you can give extra, well, not extra, but holidays to your employees, but not holidays that they have to take a day off for, but just when they say, I want a day off on Thursday, that we can just calculate it in such a way that they have a day off on Thursday for whatever reason. So to be able to do this job at a company I like and being asked by the CTO and CEO, do you want to come do this? And then say no, that, yeah. After a while, I just started feeling this was a stupid idea. I should have just said yes. So then I did the only thing left to do, and that is, I wouldn't say I begged, but I did quite nicely go ask if the job was still there. And I was actually really honest with my now CEO, and I told him, I'm sorry I said no, but I feel that if it wouldn't have mattered how much more time I would have gotten before I said no. I really believe I had to say no to realize what I said no to. Like up front, I didn't fully realize how much I wanted this new job. until I had to go basically back and say, do you still have the job for me? Yes, no. But he understood. I basically told him like I was too stuck in the status quo. And I don't think that's too healthy. I think maybe that's not a mistake because I was happy at Info Support, don't get me wrong. But I think it would have been easier if I had jumped opportunities a couple of times. Maybe in a way I was a bit rusted in one company. Like I did my internship there, I'd never done anything else. And if you want to make a jump, then it's easier if you've jumped before.
Yeah. And there's a whole context. You've been in the same company for 11 years and a half. So I totally understand how difficult it is to make the move and change it completely, what you've been doing for 11 years. So it's very hard. Maybe it wasn't even you who said no, like your conscious mind was basically, screaming to say yes, but your subconscious mind, maybe you were thinking, it's 11 years, I'm going to change my life completely. Lots of thoughts, but then by having this reflection with yourself for 1 week, then you're saying, man, this is what I want. Come on, I'd say yes.
Yeah, I told the CEO during that, when I called them back, do you still have the job? I told them literally, I'm sorry I said no. I think it was a purely emotional decision. Purely the emotion of not abandoning my info support colleagues, not leaving behind the manager that's been really good to me, and jumping into this unknown thing. It was purely an emotional decision because all the rest was good. The conditions were good. The fact they asked me shows a lot of confidence in me. They knew that it was going to be my first DevRel job, so they knew that I didn't have DevRel experience, but that I do a lot of research and I talked to a lot of DevRel people, and I was already doing a lot of DevRel activities, like talking at conferences and writing blogs and so on. So they gave me everything I could have wanted. So I can now say that 7 months later, I'm very happy I took the plunge. What I did read in a book, and it was also confirmed to me by some people I spoke with, is that when you make such a big jump, when it's been such a long time at the same company, no matter what happens, you basically need to give it 6 months. Unless if they really don't pay you or they're really abusive or something, you have to give it 6 months because the first 6 months you will still feel homesick. You will still feel, oh, I should have stayed. Oh, this company isn't what I wanted. But it was about right. After 6 months, I feel at home fully. Well, the first few months I didn't, because it's not just a job you give up when you're at a company for that long. I had quite some status within the company, as in, yeah, I was a Java champion within the company. So all the Java people accepted that. I was also the Java community leader to make sure that Java was promoted within the company. I was this conference speaker. I was also a software architect. I was always ready for all my colleagues. So I had quite some status. And it's not just the job you give up, you also give up status. Because I come into the new company, I speak to someone from marketing, I say, oh yeah, I'm a Java champion. And the first thing they say is not, oh wow, they say, what's that?
It have no idea what's that.
No? And that just shows how relative some of this stuff is, right?
Yes.
I remember becoming a Java champion, telling my mom, like, proud, like, Mom, I become a Java champion. And she was like happy for me, but I could see in her face, she didn't know what it meant.
Yeah,
So,
even
it's a,
many Java, I mean, even many Java developers don't know what is a Java champion. Imagine someone from marketing.
well, they know now, of course, because I explained it in gruesome detail to them. But I even had this other person, because I work at Timefold, I work in an amazing team, by the way. And when I was talking to one of the engineering managers, he asked me, oh, Tom, you sometimes speak at conferences? And I was like proud. Yeah, I've spoken at DevNexus in America, and I've spoken at all the DevVoxes, and I had a top rated talk at DevVox Belgium. And then he casually drops, oh yeah, I spoke at the Google I/O a couple of years ago. Google I/O. And I was like, oh God. I'm speaking at these Java conferences, and he was like at the Google conference speaking. So it was very weird to hear that, but still pretty cool.
Interesting. Is this Google I/O conference
Yeah,
a good
it's one of
one?
the biggest conferences in the world. Yeah, from Google. So you need to be invited to speak by Google to come speak. And he spoke there, I don't know, it is just like 12 years ago. I work with some really genius people at the moment, which is also scary because it's not a bad thing, but there's always like a sort of hierarchy within a company, like you're a senior in a company and the juniors look up to you. And in this at Timefold, I'm like looking around and they're all super capable senior people that have so much experience and so much knowledge that I sometimes feel a bit out of place, despite
Mhm.
being myself and also being a senior.
Mhm.
But they're all so capable, and it's just amazing to be part of that team.
Yeah, well, if you are in a room where you're not the smartest, you are in the right room.
Yeah. I like that quote as well. I like that quote as well. So I'm learning a lot every day, especially since it's a new role, right? So it's not just doing what I was doing before. It is a completely new role. And DevRel is this weird role because it floats somewhere between engineering, because I talk to the engineering team and I sometimes help them with some of the designs or write some documentation or write some code. I'm also in contact with the marketing team because, yeah, marketing and showcasing the project on social media, marketing,
Yeah.
sales. I help them to talk to customers when there's a technical part or like a demo needs to be made, then I help them there. So it's this role that goes between everything and between
Yeah.
marketing, sales, engineering. And that's also takes some getting used to talk with all these different departments. But I think there, my consultancy years have really helped that I know how to talk to a bunch of different people, to marketing, to product, to.
Amazing. Yeah, because it is this set of skills basically to be DevRel, and it's rare. It's quite rare, right? Because developer can't be only technical. A developer has to be also a good speaker, has to explain things in a clear way, has to understand a little bit about marketing, talk with marketing, because it is also a bit of marketing, right? You're promoting a product.
Mhm.
So you're promoting a product, you're also teaching developers, and you are also talking about strategies with marketing, giving talks in specific conferences. So there's a whole strategy behind the scenes. So it's
Yeah.
not only technical, it's a lot more.
Yeah, and a lot of it's communication. I don't know who the quote is from, but I saw a quote that communication is one of the most important tools you have in your career, and that about 50% is how you communicate and how well you can communicate, and only 30% is what you're actually saying. If you can communicate clearly and properly, the the things you're saying don't have to be like profound or super special, as long as you can communicate them in a clear, direct way.
And
So
it's
that's
super hard for developers. I see so many super intelligent developers who have so much difficulty to communicate and convey their messages because their heads think so quickly and they start talking very fast and nobody understands the message.
I think, yeah, part of that is also curse of knowledge. Like the more you know, the more difficult it becomes to put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't know anymore, because you're just so too far away from each other. So that's actually the interesting part as a dev role in this company, because it's a pretty highly technical company. Like these optimization algorithms, they're pretty complex. And I, on purpose, stay away of certain elements and I don't want to understand certain elements because I still want to be sort of the rookie that, yes, I actually understand everything, but I still want to have the connection with people that just get into the space and just start learning about these things. I still want to be able to emphasize with them. So there's some things that I just go, yeah, I'm not going to learn this. This is way too advanced stuff. I'm just going to focus on what I need to know and how I can communicate it towards beginners. Now, there's always a level you need, and when you do a teacher's degree, you learn this as well. You need to be a few steps above the people you're teaching, like knowledge-wise, because you need to not just know how to do something, but why you do something a certain way, have some experience with it. But if you go too high, it's like a university professor teaching kindergartners, to give an extreme example. Often that's very difficult for them despite them being geniuses because they're university professors. That's hard.
Yeah, I had a teacher in college who knew too much, and in his classes, it was very hard to learn everything he was teaching us. He was teaching very advanced stuff for Java.
Mhm.
Like we were kind of doing the tasks, but we didn't really understand why we were doing that thing. And for him, it was so obvious, all of those things, that he didn't tell us the why. So we were, just creating annotations, we were creating logs, we were using Spring without like much of a knowledge why we would use that. We were giving presentations about design patterns, even though we had no idea why we were using those. So yeah, he had a lot of knowledge, but his didactic to explain wasn't that good because he was in another level and we were just learning the basics. Like for us, it was like we didn't understand why exactly we were using all of those tools.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part about teaching, because sometimes you don't, well, if you're teaching, it's a bit different, but when you're at a conference, it's sometimes hard to know what the audience knows. So on what level that you can talk or how in depth you can go. So that's why writing an abstract is really hard, because you want to find the right balance between showing enough depth, but also not to overflow the people that are pretty new or that have a bit more trouble to grasp the ideas. And this is actually something that I see a lot of people struggle with when they are learning by themselves as well. There's this thing that I mentioned during some of my talks. It's the zone of proximal development, and it's basically these 3 circles where there's a bunch of stuff that you know, and that's basically the middle circle. And then there's things around it. That's like a small layer of things you can learn. And then there's the outside circle of all the things you can't learn yet. So if, for example, you know basic Java, then you can probably learn streams and lambdas. But you probably can't learn yet how the JVM works internally, because you need other sort of knowledge to build up to that. And I see a lot of people that get burnout or feel a bit depressed because they can't learn something. But what they're usually missing is the prerequisites to learn that thing. I was very upset that I couldn't learn machine learning, like early machine learning, not what we now do with ChatGPT, but like really machine learning. And I was trying it and I couldn't understand it. And then I started like decomposing, like, yeah, but what do I all need to know before I can do this? And it was so much math and other stuff that I hadn't learned that it was technically for me impossible to learn something like that. I couldn't learn machine learning because I had to learn some steps in between. I actually have the exact same thing with, I have an electric guitar. I've had it since I was 16. And I would love to learn to play like difficult metal music or the songs I like, but I would be forced to learn simple stuff like chord progressions and so on first. And the idea that I'm bad at playing the guitar because I can't play the songs I want is actually wrong. I can get there. I just need to do these intermediate smaller steps. And that's also how you learn a programming language. You learn intermediate small steps that build upon what you already know. If you try to learn that, the Java stream is like the typical one, but if you've no idea what object orientation is or how these chained calls work, then you're never going to understand Java streams. You first need to build up some knowledge in between first.
Exactly. And it was the same when we were doing logs with this teacher. We didn't even know why we would create logs. Like we had never worked for a company where logs were important. I would see that, making sense. And the same thing was about Spring. We didn't know much about clean code. We didn't know much about OP. There was lots of steps before learning a Spring, another Java framework.
Yeah.
Right? You have to know why you're using that thing. If you don't know why, it's just, just repeating code without understanding the basic fundamentals.
And I think that's kind of where I fear, and that's a different topic we might go into now. But with ChatGPT out now, I see that happening even more. Yes, this LLM, you can vibe code your way into a bunch of code, but if you don't understand what it does and why it's there, I still consider that quite dangerous. Because at some point, the LLM is not going to do what you want, at least for now. I don't know if that's maybe we should. If this gets recorded, I will watch this recording again in 5 years, and we'll see how I think by then.
Okay.
At least for now, I think it's so dangerous to not understand what is coming out of an LLM. And the cool thing is, you can ask the LLM, "What did you do, and why did you do it that way?" But we don't do that. The why, and in this case, the LLM, I'm pretty sure it won't hate you if you ask it why questions very directly, as opposed to humans. But you can't ask it, why did you generate this? Why not a different framework? Why? And use it as a learning tool. But unfortunately, I see a lot of people just generate a bunch of code and then forget about it. Like they don't even need to know what's there anymore. And I think that's a real risk. Will that be a risk forever? I don't know. Maybe in a couple of years.
So dangerous, right? You can't just ask, hey, AI, create this thing, create this code. And if a developer doesn't know what's going on behind the scenes, that's a big danger, right? Because they will generate code that doesn't make any sense. They will create bad code. They will create bugs. So AI, yeah, it's extremely intelligent and it can do a lot, but we need to orchestrate the work. And we need to review also. It's not just, oh, create that thing and just copy and paste in code. The code doesn't work like that. You have to review the whole thing. And you have to create intelligent prompts. You can't just say, hey, AI, create the solution. I don't care how you create it.
I saw an interesting post on LinkedIn earlier today, and that person was talking about developing with AI. And what he said is, so to develop correctly with AI, you need to correctly list your requirements. You need to explain those requirements in good human language. You need to give it guidelines on how to build the software. You need to give design guidelines. You need to tell it how to test it often, or that it should at least write tests. You should tell it that it should work in small incremental cycles. And he ended his post with saying, so basically, we're doing decent software development again. Because these are all the things that the human still needs to do and tell the AI. So that's basically doing decent software development. So there's still a lot of stuff that we don't know how this thing is going to evolve. I'm not going to pretend that I know that it won't be solved in like a year or two, and then it's super intelligent that we just think about, maybe with Neuralink, we just think about a solution and it automatically creates it. I don't know where this thing is going, but at least for now, I think what people are underestimating is they're overestimating it as a tool to generate code and underestimating it as a tool to learn. Because as a learning tool, and I'm not advocating for using it as a search engine. If you want to search something, I think Google and such is still fine. But if you want to summarize, if you want to copy paste a piece of code and ask it, hey, explain this, I think that's where there's a lot of value. And people can learn way faster than we ever could.
Yeah.
But there's still concepts. And if you don't understand these concepts, like why did you use a decorator pattern? Or why don't you use a decorator pattern? Like design patterns are still very valuable. Test-driven development is valuable. Domain-driven design is valuable. Actually, all the concepts that are everywhere are still as relevant as they ever were. And that's something I've been advocating for years. Don't focus on the next framework. Focus on the concepts that this framework makes possible. If you look at something like learning the next JavaScript framework, like React or Angular, some people want to learn React and Angular and Vue and whatever, but you just need to focus on what are the concepts. Oh, it's basically model view controller pattern that we've had for many years. So it's that same pattern, just a different syntax. So if you recognize the patterns, that's knowledge that you can easily take to the next problem, to the next framework, and that will still be valuable information for you. And I think that's something people miss, concepts. What are the concepts that are part of this solution?
Yeah, AI is such a powerful tool for learning. Like, we never had this level of intelligence where we simply get a piece of code and say, hey, AI, explain to me what's going on in this code. That's so powerful, so much power, right? Like even to refactor code, like you can get horrible code and refactor that maybe in seconds. Would have to review the code, but to refactor legacy code, it's a lot easier if you implement the right strategy, if you create the right tests before changing the code using AI. It's such an easier task than it was a few years ago.
Yeah. The thing I'm still struggling a bit with is, and kind of questioning is, what is this going to do with us long term? And the simple example is nobody can calculate anything out of their heads anymore, or difficult because we have this thing called a calculator or a smartphone in our pocket. So if we have to calculate something, we don't do it in here anymore, often. Because we have a smartphone, I don't remember almost any of the phone numbers of my friends. I still remember all the phone numbers that I had to remember 20 years ago before like mobile phones were a thing, from my mother's place and my friend's place. I still know those numbers by heart, but I can't remember the number of my wife right now. So if my phone dies, I'm lost. I'm kind of wondering what the impact, and we can say, yeah, but we don't need to know it because we have this thing anyway constantly. So it's actually good that it's not in our head. But I'm wondering what this is going to do for how we deal with programming solutions. Is this going to become a problem that we are not struggling through the code and typing it out, and then while typing, feeling like, oh, this doesn't feel good? Like these intangible things that we feel when we're developing. Oh, if I type it like this, this doesn't feel good. I'm going to change it a bit. And yes, that takes way more time, but I believe that getting to a good solution, you need to really engage with the problem. And I'm wondering, how engaged are we when we are basically delivering everything to AI? Some people say I'm way more engaged because I'm not thinking about code, I'm just thinking about the problem. That's one side. But on the other side, maybe we're not engaged enough anymore. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what this actually means. And I'm very curious to see what the future will bring for this, because the honest answer is I don't know how this is going to impact us. What I do know is that it's currently pretty much unacceptable to not experiment with this and try to learn and see how it helps you, and listen to other people and see how it helps them, and be curious about what this technology means, even though it's scary sometimes. It is scary.
It is. It is. It is, yes. Because every technology is used for the good and for the evil as well. And AI is definitely one that's going to be used for the evil. But anyway, this is another whole topic.
Yeah.
If we go in this topic, we're going to be talking about that for, I don't know, hours.
Maybe another podcast.
Yeah. So, well, you mentioned about the burnout, and that's something very interesting to me because my mentees struggle with that.
Mhm.
Like, they want to learn everything, they get overwhelmed. And I'm curious to know how you overcame your burnout. How was the process of overcoming that? Was it very painful? What were you feeling when you had the burnout? What was the cause of having the burnout? And basically how you overcame this challenge.
Okay, so let me start with the cause. And the joke short answer is it's all because of .NET and C#. The longer answer, which is technically more correct, is I was doing Java projects for many years. And at some point, we started a Java project at a customer. And then that customer said, yeah, actually, we don't want you to do it in Java because we are changing the entire company to only use .NET. Like, from a strategic perspective, having everything aligned on one programming language has a lot of benefits for hiring. And so anyway, suddenly I had to do .NET on a project that was very difficult domain-wise. And I also had to mentor two junior developers, well, they were closer to Meteor by the time we were working there, and it was very challenging. So I suddenly found myself on a project where I have to lead a team and have difficult architectural discussions with another partner while working in a programming language that I'm not good at. And we need to be careful when we say, yeah, but Java and .NET are basically the same language. Sure, but the ecosystem is different. I had to ask everything. I felt like such a junior again. Like, how do I do logging in .NET? I don't know. Like for Java, I know I integrate like Logback or any of those frameworks, and I know perfectly how to log. Even simple things like how do I change the string to an integer? I can look it up, and it's not a big deal. But when you have been working on a very high professional level in Java and then suddenly get bombarded back to this feeling like a junior in another language because you have to look up everything, that took a lot of energy. Then mentoring these juniors also took some energy, and I don't blame them. It just takes energy to really decently mentor people. Then all the architectural decisions, and it got day by day it got worse because what I was trying to do was trying to compensate in the evenings. I was trying to learn more about .NET, but change was very sudden, so I didn't have a lot of time to switch to C#. Started spending all my nights working myself to pieces. And that's what happened. Day after day, I started feeling worse, less energy, more difficult discussions. I started messing up some things, like making some bad decisions that with a rational head, I would have known that were bad decisions. But at the time, I was just trying to get it done because I was so busy and trying to catch up. And day after day, I felt worse until one day I was, 2 days in a row, I was driving with my bike to the project with tears in my eyes. I actually don't want to go to work, but I have to. And then the last day, I arrived at work. I did this amping myself up. Yes, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to be better, and today's going to be a better day. I open my laptop. I see one mail of something that went wrong. It was something silly, stupid. And I just said, nope, I'm done. Closed my laptop, went to the office where my CEO of our consultancy company was. And basically in tears, I told him, I'm sorry, but I'm done. In tears, I was really crying, like crying really badly. I can't do this anymore. And there I have to say, for the rest of the story, you need to know that the answer from my manager was, and I still get a bit emotional when I think about this. He basically said, your new job is get better. Go home. I will talk to you in a couple of months when you feel like it, but go home and rest. He also said, I saw this coming. But I couldn't stop it. So I went home, and I was home for 6 months. It was rough because I also had some highlights in my career coming up, as in I had just been accepted to speak for the first time at Java 1, but I had to cancel all that. So I was accepted at DevOps, but I had to basically cancel everything. Like I was done. I was emotionally done. I had to rest. So I was home for a couple of months. My previous company also made sure that I had a psychologist and a doctor to follow me up. So I went to a psychologist once a week, sometimes in the beginning 2 times a week, to just talk through what happened. How did I end up here? They gave me a lot of insight in what it means to have a burnout. And I think that's the most important first lesson that helps me. So when something happens, I want to understand why. Yeah, I say the why again, but I want to understand what is happening in my body, because you're feeling all sorts of things. You feel depressed. Like, why is this happening? What is the technical, what happens in your body when you're having a burnout? I read a bunch of research about that. It's basically you have some hormones, and normally they go up during the day, your stress hormones, and then in the evening and at night they go down again. So it becomes this curve, and normally they go down fully. The problem is if you don't rest, then the curve goes like this. And it keeps getting higher and higher until at some point you're physically incapable of relaxing. I was physically incapable to relax. Like I was at home thinking, oh, work is done, I'm going to relax. I could not. My brain kept going. My entire body was making these hormones. And there's only one way to really fix that, is to disconnect from everything. So I quit social media. I had to stop with my job for a while, took up Walking, I walked a lot just to have your body regulate itself. Sports is really good. I read a lot. The weird thing about burnout is the cure is relaxing, but you feel like you're not allowed to relax because you're sick. You know, when you're sick, but you need to go to the store and you run into a colleague and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were sick." That, but you have to do happy things. You have to do happy, relaxing activities to get better. But if you get spotted by a colleague, they think, "Oh, Tom is having a holiday," because Tom is, but that's the thing you need to do to relax and to get better. So it's this weird contrast between you need to relax to get better, but you feel like you shouldn't relax because you're at home sick. So that took a while. And what ultimately helped the most is that change what's in here. That's realizing that I can limit myself, that I don't have to know everything, knowing that I am good enough to do my job, that I don't have to be perfect, that I'm allowed to fail, doing breathing exercises, being nicer to myself. I don't always succeed at that even to today, but it's a mental change that needs to happen. And changing something mentally is very difficult, especially if you're used to certain patterns and you have a certain way of who you are. I always wanted to be the best and push myself. But in that case, I pushed myself too far. So there's a lot of things to learn there. For me, learning how the body works was one, then making sure that I can correct it by relaxing, doing fun stuff, exercising more, and breathing exercises help a lot as well. Meditation, all the things I at some point considered fluffy, hippie stuff actually really works. Meditating and taking care of your body really works.
Yeah. Sometimes when I feel anxious, I do the breathing exercise, and after some exercise, some breathing exercise, it really helps me to feel more relaxed, less anxious. And another thing that really helps a lot is exercise, because it's proved by science that doing exercises or lifting weights to train our muscles, it really decreases the cortisol hormone, which is the hormone of stress and fear. So doing exercise is very good. Like, you feel so good after doing that. I know that some days it's difficult to go and do exercises, but still it's a must do, right? Because it's going to make us live longer. It's going to help us to have better mood. It helps us in so many ways. So for me nowadays, health is a non-negotiable goal, because without health, really, what's the point, right? We can't do anything.
Exactly. And
our career means nothing.
It took me a burnout to realize that. Yeah, it took me a burnout to realize exactly that. And I think it's kind of ironic that coffee is often related to code. Like, we go to the coffee machine to relax for a bit, while actually coffee and any caffeinated drinks is one of the first things I cut out of my life when I had to burn out. Because caffeine is really something that amps you up. And if you're already amped up or burned out, these things do not help. At least not for me. Maybe there's some scientists that will prove me wrong, but at least for me, I had to cut that one out.
It doesn't help because coffee is synonymous of work. Right? You're drinking coffee because you want to produce, you want to be productive, you want to, get things done. But you are in this burnout state, you feel like exhausted.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Even getting out of bed can feel like too much. Like, just going out of bed and eating something was, in the beginning, it was too much. And that's weird to have to admit that as like an adult. Like, you're an adult, you're like, how old was I back then? 25 or something? When you're 25, 26-year-old and you can't even get out of bed anymore, then you're in really a bad place.
Yeah, but this is like kind of depression as well, right? So burnout would be considered depression as well, or is different?
I think I know it's clinically different, and there's even different hormones that are in play.
Okay.
I think I'm not an expert in this, so don't not medical advice, But I heard the comparison. Depression is being full of negative feelings. Burnout is being devoid of feelings. There's no feelings. You don't feel anything anymore.
Oh my God.
So I think that's kind of the conceptual difference between the two.
Yeah, like it's very hard to overcome that. Like sometimes I feel that I have too much to do as well, but I never reach to the point that I reach this burnout, this like top state where I'm at the peak of my stress and I can't do anything else. But sometimes I do feel overwhelmed.
Yeah. I think it's normal to feel overwhelmed sometimes, but you need to take some action at that time. Do some extra exercise, make sure that you take enough time to look after yourself, because you need to. Basically, I would have probably been further in my career if I've worked less, in a way, because it is quite an impact on your career to lose 6 months. Basically, if I had worked slightly less and took better care of myself, I had 6 months extra that I could have grown in my career.
Yeah.
Now I've grown in a way different way, and I think personally I needed this experience, which sounds weird, but I needed this experience to reground myself and to learn a bit more that I was having very unhealthy relationship with work, as in I was way too ambitious. But ambitious in a way of I will ignore sleep. I will just work all night on this project I'm super excited about. Well, going to bed is healthy. Basically,
Yes.
going to bed and getting enough sleep is super necessary.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and there's lots of science backing this up. Because if we don't sleep, like our mood is affected, our stress hormones go to the peak.
Yeah.
We have a lot more chances of having Alzheimer's or any other mental problem. Our energy level goes really down. And the interesting thing is that we only learn when we sleep. This is also backed up by science. So anyway, we have to put health as a maximum priority.
Yeah, and I was looking it up quickly, but apparently even after 24 hours without sleep, you can already get dangerous side effects. Well, and that's only 24 hours. If you go 11 days without, I think you might just die.
My
Like
God.
sleep is so important for everything to recover and to relax. When you go to a gym, you also don't constantly stress your arms when lifting weights. It's probably one of the most important times is the times that you don't do anything to let your muscles rest a little bit. Have a day off, have a leg day or something, work on something else, but leave some of those muscles alone. You can't tense them all the time. That's just not healthy. And the same goes for these muscles.
Exactly. And it's for sure our most powerful muscle, right? So we can't underestimate it. Think that it's unlimited. Oh, it's not.
No, it's not.
Very good. And I've seen you give many talks about how developers can learn more effectively.
Mhm.
What techniques do you personally use to learn faster?
What I think is important is to learn a little bit every day. So most days I spend at least half an hour just either browsing on the internet looking for interesting new projects, or I usually also have a backlog of these are articles I still want to read because they seem interesting. And spreading that out over a couple of days feels better to me than having to sit down in the evening on Wednesday, for example, and then do it all Wednesday evening. There's this thing called spaced repetition, which is very important concept, which basically means that you are supposed to, if you really want to learn something, you have to do it multiple times and there should be some time in between. I think The Programmer's Brain, the book I mentioned before, also mentions that. And there's this amazing Coursera course, Learning How to Learn, that mentions this as well. Basically, the best way to learn something is to not do it once and cram it in right before an exam, because then you forget it probably right after the exam. But if you want to have it in your long-term memory, you need to repeat it a bunch of times and some time in between. Actually, if I don't know, do you do any kind of Duolingo to learn some languages? Because Duolingo is exactly doing this. They are giving you words, and those words will come back every once in a while until you've shown that you know them really well. And that's actually a proven way to learn things. So the thing that I think the programmer's brain suggests as well is to make flashcards, and I actually did that. So just write cards with a concept you want to learn, and then you see the term or something, and then you try to explain what that term means, and then you can look on the back and make sure that you formulated it correctly. That's a very effective way. And once you've answered this flashcard enough times correctly, then you can throw it away and make a new one. So try to not have a 5,000 flashcards, but have 520 or something between those ranges, and try to remember those and learn in small increments.
So flashcards is something that works for you. Do you have a tool to recommend for flashcards?
I usually have just sort of notes on my phone, but I believe the one that I saw recommended was Anki. 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 And I've used it in the past, but I don't have it installed currently. And I don't know if they changed their pricing or something, but you can download it, and it allows you to make these kind of flashcards.
Very good.
And that helps a lot, just doing smaller increments, but more frequently.
Yeah, so basically repeating, learning some specific concept will help you to really internalize this knowledge.
Yeah. And when it comes to code, despite research showing that you don't actually need to write codes to learn it well, I do feel that you should write some code, because you will run into issues, and it's those issues that are interesting. If you make a Spring Boot service or a Quarkus service and you try to start it up and it doesn't run, you will run into an issue that you might also run into during your job or the next time you make a project. And then learning how to solve those problems is an interesting exercise. So experiment, try some stuff out. And I think the most important thing for maybe people that are a bit newer in their career, advocate to have time to learn during your work hours. You become more valuable for your employer if you learn, if you improve yourself.
Yeah.
And it's my firm belief that they should give you time for that.
For sure. Because it's part of our job to learn. So I see nothing wrong on doing that, like reserving at least half an hour or maybe 1 hour when you delivered like everything you need. Like, it's good for you because the next time you get another task, you're gonna deliver it faster, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or sometimes when there is a feature that's not very clear on how we're going to solve it, I actually found it very valuable to let multiple people do the research and say, don't talk to each other, but each take an hour. And then we compare notes. And then we compare designs. And then we can say, oh, that design is better, or that design has these upsides or downsides. Then there is that's more for a senior to enforce in the team, I believe. It's to really tell and advocate for your team that everyone has time to make design decisions. Because honestly, design decisions, like some architecture or a tool or a framework, can be a very impactful choice in a project. But we often don't give those choices to junior developers until they suddenly become team lead. And it was my firm belief that if I have juniors in my team, it is also my responsibility that they learn those skills.
Amazing.
So I would let them design things, and then we would discuss. And then I would ask a lot of questions, like trying to understand first before I answer something. Why did you do it this way? What are the pros and cons? Okay, we have the second colleague that has a design. What are the pros and cons of that? What if we would do it, and then I draw one line slightly different that I think is smarter? What if we do it this way? Then we get this and this benefit. Oh, and then they learn to kind of what it takes to make these technical decisions before they eventually become a team lead, and then they're forced to make these decisions. So it's also up to, well, juniors should advocate towards their lead developer that they're allowed to do this. But if there's a lead developer watching, I think you should help your juniors to get smart in making these decisions by doing it together. Because I see some team leads that kind of guard these decisions themselves and they never explain it really to their junior colleagues. But preparing future developers for those kind of decisions is super important.
I totally agree, and I never seen that happening in any company. Most junior or intermediate developers, they would never do those technical decisions, those architecture decisions. And this is bad for their careers because when they become more experienced, they're gonna make work choices because they never done enough of those choices before. And they're gonna also fail in the system design interview. It's gonna be a lot harder because then you have to study fictional case scenarios, and like you never solved anything from the real world. And it's different real world experience and fictional experiences.
Then you get the problem that you mentioned with your professor in the design patterns course. Design patterns are super valuable, but the way we're teaching them in schools, it's just a difficult topic to teach because the benefits of certain design patterns only show themselves in bigger projects or when the code becomes more complex. But if the code becomes too complex, then you can't really explain it to the students, or they don't see why a decorator pattern, for example, is a good pattern to use, or a factory pattern, or anything else. Design patterns is super tricky to teach because it's this balance between having a simple enough example so it's still understandable, but having an example that adds enough value for this pattern to be valuable. Sometimes it's quite a big distance between. And I think they're guiding the more junior developers or the less experienced developers is just super important. And I had a conversation recently with someone who said, yeah, but our senior developers don't want to teach the juniors because then maybe those juniors become seniors and then they're out of a job. Then the original senior is out of a job. So they don't want, and also companies that say, I don't want to train they don't say it literally, yeah? But what by their actions, they're saying, I don't want to train my employees because what if they leave? And there's an awesome answer to that question. What if you don't train them and they stay?
What if they stay? Exactly.
What if you don't train them and they stay? That's even worse. Then you have incompetent, untrained people that are building your software. You want to train your employees, and if they leave, then sometimes people leave because they have to move another place. It can be reasons that have nothing to do with your company. But if you don't train them, they're going to be in some real trouble.
And this is such a scarcity mindset because I can almost assure those companies that if you're teaching them, if the developer is feeling valued, and if the developer is growing, it's, chances for this developer to stay in the company are much higher rather than if these developers are earning nothing. And because I know for a fact that many developers leave their companies because they're not growing technically.
Mm-hmm.
This is extremely important for them. It's not only technical as well. Obviously, you have to, get some promotion, advance your career, right? But once they feel that they're not growing, it's a very strong reason to leave the company, right? So actually, by not training the developers, it's very likely they will leave. They won't stay in this company anymore.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the proof of the opposite. If you take very good care of your employees, they will cry if they have to feel like they have to leave you. Like yes. I was crying I cried at my previous manager 2 times when I had my burnout and I told them I can't do this anymore, and when I handed in my resignation, because a part of me really didn't want to leave because they have been so good to me. They've trained me very well. They gave me enough opportunity to go speak at conferences, to help junior developers evolve. If you take care of your employees, they don't want to leave. I'm not saying they won't leave, because there's many reasons why you might leave a company. Like you find this, in my case, a unique opportunity that you really want to try. In other cases, it's moving to a different country and you quit because of those reasons. But they won't want to leave necessarily if you take very good care of them. They might leave because of other reasons, but they probably deeply don't want to.
Yeah. And the other thing I would like to add for helping developers learn faster is first to use two monitors, because in one monitor you can maybe read documentation, or you can watch a course, or you can use AI, and the other monitor you can implement code and do your own tests. And you can also use mind map. This is a tool that I really like. I personally use MindMeister. And it's a tool where I can put all the knowledge in a mind map, and then I can open the whole mind map and see very clearly like what are the main points, and I can make the connections more quickly. So this is a very good tool, and I highly recommend developers to use that as well.
Yeah, I think using something like a mind map is underestimated as well, because how knowledge is stored in our memory is it makes connections. You smell a certain scent and suddenly you have memories of last time you smelled that was at your mom's place 20 years ago. And you have a very visible vision in your head of what that was like at that time. So our head is just full of connections. And if you're good in connecting new knowledge to something you already know, that makes it way more likely that you'll remember it.
Yeah, very good. And Tom, you've also been an organizer for the Belgium Java user group for around 3 years.
Yep.
Can you share your journey and what are the biggest challenges in organizing a jug, and how can a Java developer start running their own CG, for example?
Yeah. So a bunch of questions. Let me start with the start, how this started. So I was actually starting my own, well, I'd been to a couple of user groups, but mainly in the Netherlands. And I noticed that in Belgium, there wasn't such an active user group scene. So I decided to start my own user group, the Antwerp Java user group. I made the unfortunate mistake / I didn't know, to start that one in February 2020.
Oh.
Then a little thing called COVID happened, which meant we couldn't organize anything. I organized 2 events online, and then I basically said, you know what, we're going to wait until this thing is gone, because I didn't want to start a jug to do it online. I really want the hallway track, connecting to people while eating a pizza or drinking something. So that got put in the freezer immediately on the start. And then when COVID was kind of past, I talked to Stefan, who had organized the BJUG earlier, and BJUG was kind of quiet. So I talked to him and asked, hey, can you help me kickstart this Antwerp jug thing? And he said, no, but if you want, the BJUG is kind of dead. Do you want to take it over? And I said, I doubted for a second. Then eventually I took over, basically. I claimed it on meetup.com. I hosted a BOF session at DevVox, which is more of an informal session. And I basically asked the Belgian community who wants to help. And I had a plan. I basically decided to host everything on GitHub. So our website is on GitHub, our code of conduct is on GitHub, the guidelines are on GitHub, and all our events are on GitHub. So that means that whenever we want to host a meetup, I just post an issue in our GitHub page that says event September. There's a few tasks that need to happen, and anyone can pick it up. And if nobody picks it up, I'll pick it up, because I still want this to happen. So the tasks are find a location. So we need to find a location to host our event that is easy to access and offers pizza and something to drink. A pizza or some food and something to drink. It's optional, but so far everyone has done it. We need a speaker, 1 or 2. That's another task.
Sure.
And then we have some activities around making the meetup page, making a social card, and so on. So basically, I list that issue, and in the beginning, it was hard to get people to comment. But right now, when I make that issue, often I already get a comment from someone, hey, I want to come speak. I can speak in September. Can we do it here? Or I get a comment from a company that says, I want to host. So we do everything on GitHub, and that has made it more of a community feeling, because
Yeah.
I realized that quite some jugs are organized from a company or from one or two people. And while I do have two co-organizers, that's Frank and Loic, so I consider myself a co-organizer, not the organizer anymore.
Yeah.
While we do have a fixed group, anyone can actually contribute. So if anyone wants to host something or help us organize something, everyone can do that. Because I wanted to have it more open than any other jug out there. And that's what we've been doing. And whenever something for the jug needs to happen, we make an issue on GitHub and then we see what happens. We have some online calls as well. For example, the old logo had looked like a coffee grinder. Like you put beans in it and you turn it so it grinds the coffee. But that's so old, nobody really realized what it was anymore. So one of the issues we added was make a recognizable logo. And that's why we now have the Belgian Duke logo that really shows that we're a Java user group. That was basically, we added an issue on GitHub that says we need a new logo. And someone started commenting on it. Hey, I've been working on this logo. Here it is. What do you think? So it's made it pretty easy. I basically outsource everything, which makes it more of a community feel, but also makes it easier for me because I knew that I was going to become a parent pretty soon. So I needed to delegate some stuff to other people so that the jug could keep running, even if I go away for 2-3 months. And that's
Perfect.
going well. So far, we've done almost every month. I used to be able to say like clockwork, but we actually skipped March this year because of diverse reasons. But normally once a month, we have something Java related in Belgium, except for the summer holidays.
Amazing. And this is an example of successful jug because if the jug depends on you, like we're gonna have, adversity in our lives, and it's not possible to continue like only you. Like you have to create really this system and this community around you. Otherwise, and that's why I think most jugs they fail because it depends only on one person and then it doesn't work.
Yeah, and we've had periods where one of the leaders, either that's me or one of the other two, has a moment of, I really can't do the jug this month. Maybe doing too many conferences accidentally, or something with the family going on. In my case, I have the small kids, so sometimes that doesn't work out. And then we can just say, you know what, guys, not for me this month. The event is organized, so good luck. And then that keeps going. And I think that's really important to not depend on one person. The goal for the Belgian jug has always been from the beginning to include the community, and with the hope that someone would start a separate jug at some point. Like we're traveling circus, we go through the entire of Belgium. So every month we go to a different province, basically to see what provinces are successful enough to have their own jug. And then we'll see if they want to spin off or how they do that. And we will fully support them on creating their own jug. But this is like our experiment for now.
And what about the challenge of getting sponsorship? Because maybe that's one of the most difficult things of having a jug, or it's easy. How is your perspective on that?
Yeah, so the thing with the BJUG is the BJUG has existed since 1997. And it's already had 1,100 members on meetup.com. But
Nice.
honestly, I'm not too sure how many of those people still look at meetup.com. So we have some background, and that made it easy in a way. There's a couple of things I think we did really right from the beginning, and that is have very clear rules around what does a sponsor/partnership mean. So I talked to a lot of my friends that host jugs, like mostly in the Netherlands, and I asked them advice, like how do you do certain things? And one of the things we realized is we don't want to have a budget. We don't take monetary sponsorship because that opens us up to all sort of administration. Like you have to have an official bookkeeping, then there's a bank account with money on it somewhere that belongs to the jug, but then how do we defend that? Then what if the person was assigned to the bank account? This whole thing. So we wanted to keep it very low weight. So we have no money, we have no bank account, which means that we are fully dependent on sponsors. So one of the worries that we saw from sponsors is that when getting enough people, basically, and because we have been going on for so long, we do get enough people. And we basically say, hey, we want to host at your company. We often have speakers that speak at DevOps or something, and we do change them with newer speakers to give those people a chance. But we do have, luckily, a very high quality of speakers coming in.
Nice.
And then it's a relatively nice, I think it's a really good deal. We come to your company, we bring speakers, we bring other Java-minded developers. So if you want to talk to them, there's some rules around no direct recruiting. If they ask, are you hiring? Then of course it's fine. But we bring some people to your company. We shout you out on social media. Hey, we're being hosted by this company. So everyone can see that you're doing something in the Java community. And all you have to do is get us a room and some drinks and some food. So that's a really nice deal already. Now, that had some consequences. What our sponsors get actually relates to how many people can come to the meetup. And let me explain that a bit. Historically, some jugs have had issues with finding people because if you host at company A, employees from competitor company B might not be allowed to come to that meetup and not allowed or not incentivized to come to your meetup. Because if you host the meetup at a competitor, why would they send their employees to go there and see how awesome the competitor is? So we basically told our sponsors, you do not get to say a word that evening, which is kind of tough because usually the sponsor gets like a 10-minute slot to say something. And we said, nope, you are not allowed to say anything. You are allowed to put up banners because it's your office. You do what you want at your office, but we shout you out on social media, but you're not allowed to say anything during the session itself. And you're not even allowed to provide a speaker for that evening. So if it's hosted at your company, you are not allowed to speak, which is a rough guideline. But so far, everyone has understood. It's basically to keep bias out of it and also a bit to protect our sponsors. Because some of the sponsors think, I sponsor the evening, I get to say something for 10 minutes, not realizing that people will hate you if you do a marketing talk for 10 minutes.
Developers would hate it, yeah.
We just check out. We just mentally turn off for 10 minutes and we turn on again once the content starts. So it adds hardly any value to anyone. So then why do it? Because, we need to give our sponsor something. No, we give them a shout out on social media.
Yeah.
We bring developers to them, and for their employees, we get them like a DevOps level speaker or like a really good speaker that we trust. So the deal is good enough. We don't need to give them a sponsor slot.
Yeah. And it's even better to follow this approach because then developers would enjoy more to join that company. But if they see that, it's a marketing company, they will say, why bother? I don't want to join this company.
And we did have some sponsors that say, if we can't say anything, then we're not doing it. And then I'm like, it's fine. This is the guidelines that we wrote down. Every company has to obey this, and we will not budge from that. And it's kind of strict, but it has worked so far. And we are now actually in the position, since we've been going again for 3 years, our year is usually already full with just the companies that hosted last year. So every company is only allowed to host once a year, also to keep bias out. So it's not always, because that's what some jugs do as well. They always host at the same company because the jug is actually it's very tightly coupled to the company they're hosting at. And I said, no, we can host once a year and we'll do our best to find the different location once every month. And that has kept the bias out of it. And I can really tell that our audience appreciates it a lot. Some are a bit upset because our jug is sometimes at the other side of the country, but Belgium isn't such a large country. And I'm like, this is what I think we need to do to keep it unbiased and everyone on board. So what are the challenges? I think deciding those things. I think the hardest thing of starting a jug is deciding those guidelines. Like, how are you going to approach sponsorship? do you want money to do something independently? Because basically, if sponsors tell us we don't want to host, we have to find a new location or find something. We have to solve that problem. Also, conflicts of two speakers from different companies that don't want to present at the same evening, surprisingly.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or the wait list that's full. There's only room for 50 people, but there's 20 more people on the wait list. How do you deal with that? It's all these little concerns that actually aren't that important in the end. But I think setting up a jug is probably the hardest work. So I would recommend anyone that wants to run a jug, if there's already some sort of meetup in the area, ask them if you can contribute and host a few events through them. If someone would want to start a jug in Belgium, I would really recommend to host a few B-jugs for us. Because we have everything. We have the meetup, we have the guidelines, how we operate, we have some sponsorship locations. Host it a couple of times through us. If you like
Nice.
it, because that's the first part. If you like it, then you can continue. Else you can just say, I stop, and then nothing is lost. Because starting a jug, having a logo, a meetup page, finding the people, doing the marketing, it's a lot of work. And if you can first have a taste of, do I actually like doing this? And there's nothing wrong with not liking it. Some people just don't like hosting events. That's fine. But to have a low entry into this organization space, I think is important. So if you can find that, find a local meetup somewhere, go talk to them. Can I help you out? Not only because you want to host something yourself, but also to grow your network. Even if you then end up just co-organizing that meetup, that's perfectly fine. You're doing a great thing for your career by hosting and helping these sort of events.
Awesome. And I also watched your talk at JCOM about becoming a parent and having a career. So how has becoming a parent impacted our developer career?
It changes everything. You always think up front, yeah, all parents say that it changes everything. It won't be that bad for me. No, it changed quite a bit. I used to be extremely career focused. And while my career is still important, there's something in my life that's much more important, and that's my kid. How does it impact you? Well, lack of sleep is a common one. So when it comes to the mental health thing and sleep, it's important that probably you will have to take it slightly slower in your job and spend some time with your child. But I must say, I wouldn't want to trade this for the world. If I was forced to make a choice, give up your career, like you're no longer a Java champion, like that part just disappears.
Mhm.
Or my son disappears, that I don't even have to think about that. Take all my Java champion stuff, forget my career, I don't care, because this kid is the most important thing in my life. And it is challenging, because if I was very career oriented, to find that balance again between I still want to have a career, but I also want to be there for my child, that takes a while to also mentally reconcile in my head. Like it really messed me up I'm not going to say depressed or burnout or something, but it did mess me up. Like, where are my priorities now? Because simple things like, oh, I'll work on a pet project tonight. Yeah, baby screaming. Can't. Or baby has something like, I hope if you are eating while watching this, I recommend you mute this next part. But yesterday I was driving home with my kid, and I went to pick him up, and I was driving home with my kid in the back seat, and I thought, oh yeah, it's going to be a relaxing evening. I'm just going to read like a new book about programming that I was planning to read, and he puked all over the car. So my life changed from a nice relaxing evening to cleaning the puke out of my car, making sure my kid was fine, putting him into bath, reading him some more books than I would usually do, because I need to calm him down and make sure he feels safe. So things just happen with a baby that don't happen when you don't have one. But it's this strange thing. Some people say it's hard, but it's worth it. And I didn't fully understand what those words meant until I had one. I do believe that you can still have a career with a kid. But I think once you have one, and that's what I feel, your career just becomes less important.
Yeah.
And
Those are
you can still have one, but it takes sacrifices then. And I'm not sure I'm willing to make sacrifices when it comes to my kid, especially not the first couple of years. When he's 12, he won't even want to play with me. He'll find
yes.
like other kids to play with. But
Yes.
right now it's dad mode, you know? I am dad. I am this large, compared to him, I'm like this ginormous creature that takes him out of bed and dresses him and plays with him. But there's gonna be some. I actually talk because I became a dad a month or two after I became a Java champion, and I was really like, I want to be a Java champion, not as in I'm a champion, but I wanted to champion Java because that's what it really means, right? It talks about making other people enthusiastic about Java. And
Yeah.
as soon as my kid was born, I was like, I don't care about Java for the next couple of months because this is it in my life. And yeah, you can still have a career, you can still do many things. But I spoke to some other Java champions and I told them, like, I feel conflicted. Like, I still want to champion Java, but I also want to be there for my kid. And all of them universally said, it's just Java champion, man. Just take care of your kid. They grew up, these were all Java champions that have kids that are like 15, 16, or even have left the house now. And they all told me, you will regret every second you don't spend with that kid. That's the level that your career will change. It changes basically because chances are you will care less. There's not necessarily care less, there's something you care way more about. And it's normal to feel. I felt a little bit like he was taking away my career in the beginning.
Mhm.
And that's partially true,
Mhm.
but it's also absolutely worth every second.
Yeah.
There's
And go
I
ahead.
well, I'll tell you one more thing. So I had a bunch of conferences lately. So I was gone from home quite a bit. And it breaks your heart when your kid just says bye or doesn't have this very happy reaction anymore because he hasn't seen you for a couple of days. And when they're young, that goes fast. If they don't see you a couple of days, there's already a small disconnect. It's subtle, but you can feel it, and you can feel it pretty hard as a parent. So I spent a bunch of time more focused on him, put away my phone. Like I was on social media way too much, just following up with everything happening in the Java community. Just they're so young for such a short time, and you will regret not spending time with them when they tell you, sorry, dad. If they even say sorry, if they just leave the house and go play with their friends when they're 12, or if it even takes till 12, I think at the age of 6, he will be running outside here just playing with friends. So
Huh.
enjoy it while it lasts. And a career is only a significant but less important part in my life at the moment.
Yeah. And the thing is that if you miss the time with your son now, like, you can't ever recover that.
No,
Your career, you can, right? Because, you know, it Java won't vanish all of a sudden, but your baby age will, right? He's not he won't be a baby forever.
he is in a way vanishing. Like when I look at pictures from a year ago, I sometimes get a bit emotional because I know that kid from a year ago is not coming back. He's not. He's gonna grow up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's already going way too fast, man. I'm really looking at him like, oh damn, like it's this weird feeling. You're excited for everything they learn. Oh, now they can walk. Now they can say these words. But on the other hand, there's this big feeling of stop growing up, you little one. I still want to hug you and hold you. You're so cute. Stop grow like it's being proud that they're growing up, but also stop it. Stop it. Stay the little loving creature that you are. Yeah, that's parent life. They grow up way too fast. So don't, despite being like career advice oriented, this podcast, I would say make sure you have your priorities right when it comes to kids. If there's an
Yeah.
important meeting, but your kid is crying, often the best choice is just to close the laptop and go to your kid.
Family first,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Good, very good. Those are profound words, and they, you know, it's such a strong feeling that I can see. I can see on in
Yeah.
you, like the strong feeling I can see, like how everything changes.
Yeah. And at the same time, nothing changes. Like I still have a good career.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
still doing
Yeah.
fine, but it's more about balance.
Balance, exactly. I think that's the word when you need more time with your family.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. And so you became a DevRel. In your opinion, what are the steps a senior Java developer should take to become a DevRel?
First, see if you like talk to some DevRel people and see if what they're saying sounds interesting to you.
Hmm.
And talk to many different people because the DevRel role means different things in different companies. Like I am a DevRel and a startup, well, more scale-up company. We're like 30 plus people now. For me, I have to communicate with sales, with marketing, as I said before, with engineering. Some DevRel roles are more marketing oriented, some are more sales oriented. So it really depends on the kind of company you want to end up with, what this DevRel role means. Then, to kind of get insights in what that means, start doing DevRel stuff. I was actually sort of a DevRel before I officially got the title. I was blogging, I was speaking at conferences, I was doing my best to, in my consultant life, communicating with different departments so that communication skill was going well. There's still a bunch of stuff I don't know, but you don't need to know everything before you start a new role. Like
Mhm.
I've learned since I joined, I've learned so much about marketing and sales and all that stuff. And there's a good DevRel community out there where you can basically talk to other DevRel and ask, like, how do I do this? Where do I fit in? How do I make sure that I can actually do my job? How do I prove that DevRel is valuable? Is one of the big questions because it's this long-term thing. I talk to someone at a conference and maybe 2 years down the line, they buy our product. How do I prove that was because I spoke at a conference that they learned about Timefold? And so there's this, it's a tricky job, but it's a very interesting, flexible job.
Mhm.
And I would say you can work on the skills without being a DevRel.
Okay. And how is a day-to-day work as a DevRel?
It depends on the day and where the focus is. So yeah, I'm kind of doubting how much I can say about this publicly because I'll say it more broadly.
Yeah, just say more
Uh,
broadly. Yeah, it's fine.
so often I'm talking about documentation. We have our engineering team. I read the documentation. I try out the documentation. I try to build cool stuff with Timefold to
Yeah.
see what's it like from a user perspective. That's obviously what I like doing the most. Then with marketing, I write some blog posts and I sync with them. Like, how do we market this? Or are there topics that you think the market wants to see now? But I still do it in my own quirky style. So the blog posts are still me. I just ask input from them. What do you think is valuable to speak about now? And sales, I sometimes join a sale call or watch one of the recordings of a sale call. And I just see like, where did our salespeople run into some sort of issue? Like just explaining something, or maybe we need a visual for something. I make YouTube videos to explain certain concepts that you can solve with Timefold, but the concepts are more general. So
Mhm.
it's a very diverse group, and actually, DevRel is what you make of it. So I've heard two expressions. DevRel is what you make of it, and the other expression is DevRel is what the company needs.
Mhm.
So when I just joined, I was like, oh, I'm gonna only work on the open source and help the open source. And then I quickly learned, no, we have a real need in marketing. So I did more
Yeah.
marketing-like activities. And now it's switching again to be more engineering again. So it is the it feels a bit weird sometimes because you often don't fully own something. You're a supporting character in these other departments. but I'm quite comfortable in that role, like helping other people shine, help the marketing team shine, help the engineers shine, and not always put myself on the foreground.
Awesome. And well, for sure you use lots of soft skills, but in your opinion, what are the most important soft skills for senior Java developers?
Knowing how to express yourself eloquently.
Oh,
And I'm pretty sure that if you watch this podcast, you see me doubt quite a bit and not always expressing myself perfectly. But being able to do that when it really matters in important discussions and important conversations is super valuable. One podcast I might recommend is Think Fast, Talk Smart. It's a good podcast that speaks about how to communicate ideas, lots of insights there. And surprisingly, one of the skills, well, the three that I mentioned during my talk last week are still the ones I think are the most important. And they're hard to train, but you need curiosity to explore new ideas and to keep your mind open. You need empathy to ask the right questions, ask why or how is it going, or really empathize with people. Because if you understand them, then you can decently explain it to them in their context. And a bit of bravery to sometimes make a jump that feels scary, but in the end might be the right move anyway. So those three.
amazing. Think fast and talk smart.
Yeah.
The name of the
And
podcast.
they also have the book Think Fast, Talk. Oh, I can't. That's useless with the scan. But they also have the book Think Faster, Talk Smarter, and that's basically the book version of the podcast.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and that one's actually really good in how you could communicate and some tips on how communication works.
Very good. I also looked into your article on reviewing code generated by LLMs. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see it as a future for Java developers?
Well, we discussed the topic shortly earlier. Huh?
Yeah.
Is it the future? Probably. Because it adds a lot of value. I think we're still sort of figuring out where it adds the most value. And as I said before, I have my concerns about what this will do with how we code. Like, how much are we still having in our head? What sort of concepts do we still understand? And I think that there's a lot of hype now, and it's dangerous to just follow the hype blindly. So we should stay vigilant, yet curious. Try it out, see how it see how it helps you. I know some people that say this makes me so much faster, and I know just the same amount of people that say this is just not helping me at all. So there's probably value. Is it the future? It is a future. I know I'm pretty happy with like the enhanced code completion that IntelliJ now has.
Yeah.
Like its suggestions are pretty good, so it makes me faster. The risk is always that when it suggests something and when I wanted to go somewhere else, then it actually knocks my brain out of a certain path. You know, in my head I already knew what I was going to type, then it suggests something else, and now my brain has to recalibrate. That's not what I wanted to do, and then it hinders me. So all I can say now is try out, experiment, build an MCP server to see how that thing works. It's an interesting future anyway.
Very good. And you mentioned a couple of books here. The Cultural Map, The Programmer's Brain.
Yeah.
But do you have more books to recommend for Java developers?
For technical books, I always say read what you think is interesting and find your niche. So if you are interested in microservices, read a book about microservices. On a technical level, there's so much you could read.
Yeah.
That's why most of the books I've recommended now are mainly like more soft skill like books, because those just translate better. Another one, if it's about convincing people or talking to business owners, it's How to Win Friends and Influence People by
That's a very good book.
Dale Carnegie. Yeah. It's an older book, but it's really good. It really explains how you can convince someone, and not in a bad way, not in a sneaky, backstabbing, sort of coercing way, but more like a genuine listening to them, communicating clearly way.
Yeah.
I can give you a bunch of technical books, but the risk with technical books is that it's not relevant for people that read it, not relevant for people that are listening to your podcast. That there's no technical book that has given me a sense that I should speak about it loudly. There's good books out there, like Building Microservices by Sam Newman. The second edition is great, but it's not probably not for everyone.
Yeah. Definitely, you, Java developer, have to understand the context of your career and what is the most important skill for you to learn, and then focus on that. So it's difficult to say, like, this book. Yeah, there are some books that are really like so good that we can say, hey, those books will help you. But at the same time, you have to focus. Otherwise, we're gonna go to the problem of burning out.
Yeah, I think reading books about general concepts is always better than about very specific programming language, unless it's the programming language that you do day by day.
Yes.
If you never code Kotlin, then don't read a book about Kotlin, unless if you really feel like you have enough energy. That's the thing with this limiting yourself. If you have enough energy, you can do whatever you want. And you should, when you have enough energy, try something new that made you curious. But it's more, if you're already a bit overwhelmed, then don't think you have to. It's more it's a nice to have when you have the energy to do so. But general concepts like design patterns is super applicable and super broad. Clean code is also domain-driven design. Like these general concepts that are not language specific or even decennia specific 20 years ago, these were as relevant as today. So I think that's those books add the most value.
And regarding courses, you mentioned a very nice course for Coursera, learning how to learn. Is there any other course you would recommend?
If you're interested in the nitty-gritties of machine learning, the machine learning course by Andrew NG. I don't know how to pronounce that, but the last name is spelled 2 letters NG. And I think those are the only two that I've really, really loved.
Remember the name of the course? Andrew NG, machine learning.
Yeah, machine learning. I
must say found it.
Yeah, that is really for the fans of math, and it really goes deep into the machine learning. It's a really good course.
Very good. Machine learning specialization.
Probably that one, yeah.
Very good. Awesome. So, Tom,
yes.
My last question to you is based on your career experience and the challenges you faced. What key career advice would you give to Java developers?
Be yourself in everything you do, but try to improve yourself as well. As in, I'm a silly, weird guy. My talks are silly and weird. And that's okay. I have a certain way to interact with people. I do my best to reach out to people and congratulate them on things like a job promotion. But you can be yourself while still trying to improve yourself. And I think that's the key part. I think I have gotten a lot in my career by being authentic and just myself and not trying to play a role. I didn't try to be this super confident influencer or this super 10 no, not 10x 100x developer. I'm just an authentic person. I'm just myself. I have my flaws, I have my failures. I speak openly about them, and I think that has given me a lot of credits with people. A lot of people appreciate that I'm just open and honest about the burnout, about almost anything. Also, when I don't know something, I will just plainly say, I don't know this. I will not try to make something up. But on the other hand, I'm still trying to improve myself. So I get a little bit better every day. And I think the combination of those two, be yourself, but try to improve yourself, is the most generic and best advice I can give you at this point.
And I really like the way you are, because you are yourself, you don't put a mask and just pretend things. And it really helps when you show vulnerability, right?
Hmm?
When you talk about the challenges, because there are lots of developers who go through burnout. There are lots of developers who feel the imposter syndrome. There are lots of developers who feel there is so much to learn. And if we don't expose those vulnerabilities, we don't even look like humans. And we don't create any connection with other people. So this is so important to do. And this is something I also exercise myself. Like I do that as much as possible. I show I'm vulnerable as well, right? Not in a victim way, because there's a fine line here, right? There is people who say, oh, and they start complaining and they put themselves in a victim and the victim position and they don't take any action. But being vulnerable and saying, hey, I take responsibility for those things and I will improve myself despite my challenges. This is, true bravery. This is empathy. This is being authentic, right? And
Correct.
this is really powerful. This is what connects people. Like the worst thing you can do as a speaker, or like you don't even need to be a speaker, is to be that shallow person who saying that is a robot. I don't know. So it's
And putting a
just
mask on is also so exhausting. To have to play a role that's not you. Oh, no. No, I'd rather have people think that I'm a silly, weird guy than that I have to put on a mask. Let them think whatever they want.
and that gives you so much power as well. It
Yeah.
gives us so much power to be authentic. And I have a follow-up question for you, and this might be a very philosophical question, might be a difficult one to answer, but how do you know you're being yourself?
Oh, dude, that's a difficult question because being myself took a long time. Not to go into the victim role, but I did get bullied in school, and it took me a while to appreciate myself and to authentically be myself. I think a part of being yourself is just being, it's not just, it's super difficult, but finding a place where you can be yourself is more, and really feeling whatever I say, whoever I am, it flows naturally. It just doesn't take energy to do what I do on a day by day basis. Like interacting with people, it just flows. Like I don't have to, I'm surrounded by people that get my jokes. If they don't get my jokes, they will go like, "Oh, with a stupid, I'm a dad now. I'm really practicing my dad jokes." So it's just, if you can, how do you know if you're being yourself is such a philosophical question. And I haven't thought about this enough. For me, it's you're being yourself when it doesn't cost any energy to just do what you do. Doesn't mean that my job doesn't take me energy. Of course it takes energy, but just the extra energy of having to pretend to be like the super confident, super intelligent guy. I'm just not super confident. I have my weaknesses and I get nervous and that's okay. I think getting to accept yourself on different levels is also a very important thing to do. And for me, it took 30 years until I finally realized like I'm good enough. My career is great. I have an awesome family. I can be my quirky self. I do nerdy things and people will appreciate it. And people that don't appreciate it are just not the right people. And that's fine. They have different preferences. I think a lot of our youth is so focused on what other people think of them. And you see that now with social media as well. And I feel it as well. If I post something, I want my likes. I want people to like what I say. And I think we're kind of, I'm very afraid for my son that he's going to grow up in a world where everything like that becomes shallow, where it is literally, I post something and if I don't get 10 likes, I get depressed. And I see some young people that are going through that right now. And I think one of the biggest powers is at some point realizing that there's a very select group of people that I care what they think about me. I care what my wife thinks about me. because she's my wife. I care what my
Sure.
son thinks about me the most.
Sure.
And there's a few other people, but not that many. And that group knows pretty well who I am and what I like, and they will fake laughing at the joke because I thought it was funny. So it's partially find your people and also accept yourself, I think. And I know that doesn't really answer the question, how do you know when you're being yourself? I think the best answer I have right now without thinking too much about it is when everything just flows.
That's a good answer, actually. You know you're being yourself when things flow, when you're not forcing something that, takes you a bunch of energy, right? To pretend you're like you're someone else, you're perfect. We're not. We are in our way. We have our weakness. We have our our struggles.
And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't work on yourself and try to
Yeah,
stretch your skills. But I know, let me give you one concrete example, and maybe we can end this podcast on that.
sure.
I am a very nervous person when I need to go speak to new people. I get very anxious when I speak to new people.
Me
And
too.
I overcame that by a simple thing. I am also I love giving people things.
Oh,
So you already know where this is
nice.
going. So
Yeah,
I combined I am too nervous to speak to people, especially if you're a new speaker and you enter a speaker room and like your heroes are in the room and you want to talk to them. My trick was I give them chocolates. I bring
oh,
something
that's
culturally from my country. I say, "Do you want a chocolate?" They see that you're another speaker. I say, "Do you want a Belgian chocolate?" And you're already interesting if you're in America or a different country because they're like, "Why is a Belgian guy here?" They're already interested in talking to you. And I combined one of my strengths, like wanting to hand things out to people, and I want to promote the Belgian culture a little bit when I'm abroad. And I combined that with one of the things I get very anxious about. And the combination was basically this kind of solves it. Because
wow.
in my head, I just hacked my head in a way that it allows me to talk to anyone. I just walk
That's
around, I
amazing.
give people chocolate, and then I have a conversation.
Wow.
I'm just being my generous self, but that is like a hack to solve my anxiety to speak to new people.
That's so cool because it can be applied in any area, right? We can make something we love to do with facing our fears.
And I think that's the best way to face a fear is if you can mix it with something that you love to do. And it's actually the same with if you're building a pet project because you want to learn Spring, for heaven's sake, build something like a domain that you're interested in. If you're interested in tennis, build like a small tennis management app or bring your interests into what you're doing, especially when you're trying to learn something. Make it fun.
Make it fun. Yeah. Man, amazing. Tom, thank you so much for every lesson you shared, all the
You're welcome.
insights, for sharing all your experience. I learned a lot, and I'm pretty much sure Java Challenger's audience will learn a lot as well. So thanks a lot for your contribution, for your time, and I'm very sure that we're going to meet very soon. Some conference, or
Probably.
maybe in the Belgium there is a group. I would be really happy to be there.
For example, that we would love to have you there. And by the way, as a message to the audience, feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. And if you have anything you want to talk about, I can't guarantee that I always have time, but if I have a message, I do try to respond to most people. So if you want to reach out and connect to me, that's encouraged.
Very good. I'm leaving all the contact information from Tom Cruise in the description of this video. I'm also referring all the books and podcasts he mentioned here. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching us here and or listening. And that's it. Thank you so much, Tom.
All right. See ya.
Cheers. See you.